So welcome to another Wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking another look at Plains Indian Wars.
Why do you say that, taking
GMT
another
games.
look?
Because we played a prototype of this,
Yeah,
like 4 years ago?
like 4 years ago.
So
2017.
if you want to go into the archives and have a little dig and a dive, you can see, I think, a clean-shaven both of us.
Yes,
Playing a prototype
much younger.
of this.
I had more hair. I think you had more hair.
Oh, yes, definitely. You can go and watch that. So it's this. The game was on P500 for a long time. Mm-hmm. Kind of was just not quite there, and then finally,
I think it was like at around 400, 420.
It was like languishing.
Yeah.
And there was rumors that it might get removed.
Yep.
And then it finally they're like, we're doing it, made the cut.
Well, actually, somebody ended up buying the remaining 75 or 80.
Really?
Like paid for the 75, an anonymous
Just to get it
donation.
over there. Well, that's very kind of them.
So who that was, I don't know. Could have been the designer. Could have been
Just wanted to get it
GMT.
done.
I don't know.
But either way, this has finally come to fruition. So this is a 1 to 4 player game covering kind of the American move out west, and then their conflicts with the Plains Indians tribes. Mm-hmm. So if you've ever played the Birth of America series from Academy Games, this uses that same core system to it.
Yeah.
If you've played that, you'll be immediately very familiar with this.
It's very similar in almost all ways. There's just a little bit slight difference, but cards are pretty much used the same. Dice are pretty much the same. The drawing to determine faction order is pretty much the same.
Yeah, so the first time we played a prototype of this, we just played it to 2-player.
Yeah.
And then we played this kind of final production version of it 3-player, which was a kind of a different experience.
It was.
And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But I think playing this with either 2 players or with 4 players, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get the most even gameplay between the players.
Because there's 4 different factions, what ended up happening in our 3-player game was you were both the settlers and the U.S. cavalry. You were working together, but they did change the victory conditions to kind of take account of that, and I thought that was well done.
Yes.
But then the other 2 players split the Southern Plains Indians and the Northern Plain tribes, and they had some changes to their victory conditions.
Yeah, but just the way that the disc activations work, I felt like I was doing twice as much stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So if I was going to do it 3-player again, you'd split up the US factions and have one combined Indian per player. I think that would make it not more, it's not like to a fairness, it's to do with how much stuff you actually do in the game.
Well, there was a little bit of downtime. I remember when you were pulling, because there's 6 different color of discs?
There's 7 discs.
7 discs.
And 5 of them I had to control, and 2 of them were your respective colors.
And a couple of them, the wagon trains, it was just move all these out, right? And the railroad, it was
can you
based
build,
on how many you roll. And then roll.
But it's still stuff. It's still stuff.
Yeah, it just didn't take the whole. It was much quicker stuff, but still, ultimately, you're right. 5 activations for you.
Yeah.
Mike and I, who were both the Indian tribes, we sat there and watched a little bit, and it wasn't terrible, but I remember thinking, wow, there's a lot of downtime on this.
But if you flip-flopped it, the settler player would have the brown, the white, and the black. The US Cav player would have the purple and the blue, and then the Indian player would have the orange and the green. Yeah. So it'd be less skewed in physical play time.
The rules actually there are a couple different options. We just chose the one option where we split the way we did.
And that was purely based on, I was sat over here and both of them were over here.
Yeah, and it was cool. That was cool. Once again, we were replaying it after playing it 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to report, I don't think the mechanics of the game have changed significantly from that time.
Nope.
The production value has changed significantly.
Which it was always going to. We played this little prototype. You can go and look at that. It is a prototype.
The map
much nicer.
The map was a lot more abstract. The map had some very darker colors.
It was it was just very high contrast for like hard to look at.
Yeah, and I didn't think it was ugly. I know you had a different, and that's fine. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or throw you under the bus.
It was ugly. It's not.
It was just that style.
Yeah.
That was the style of the game. The artist had done a couple of other games that we've played, and I didn't think those maps were as dark or as difficult to see. And
because of the color palette, it was all very gaudy. But here it's much more muted, much more playable.
Well, and what I would say here, the huge difference with the map is the relief elements. You've got the hills and the mountains.
Yes.
You can see these big rocky mountains here. And you've got the Black Hills, and I think it looks really nice. It's a good presentation. You've got the rivers drawn in. I just think it's a much better looking map to play the game on.
And it always was going to be, right?
Yeah,
when things go to production, the prototypes that some of the games we play are like,
yeah,
that was a prototype.
Yeah.
So the game itself is a kind of a dudes on a map area control game.
That is the heart of the game, and I think it's very important to remember that. I think in our play, we kind of lost sight of that, or at least
I did.
You did. You were trying to finish the railroad, which is important.
Yes.
But it's not the end-all, be-all of the game.
No.
It's really about area control. The more areas you can control, the more points you're going to score. You get points from other ways, but it's just important to keep that in mind. It is an area control game at heart. That's what the focus is.
Yes. And so in the system, you've got your little deck of cards, and it's not very many. And
15.
You will play through, or one player will play through their whole deck. That's one of the end game triggers.
Yeah.
The other one is the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, by the end of our game, I think I had like one card left in
Most
my mind,
of us, I think,
maybe two
I had
in the other.
3. And it was interesting. The makeup of the deck, there's 15 cards. 10 of them are the engagement, war party, migration cards, which activate.
Yeah, those
they
are like
put cubes.
The core movement.
Yeah, it's how you move around the board. There are 10 of those, so a majority of those are that. The other 5 are event cards. The interesting thing about the card play, and I think it's very unique and interesting, is each turn a player can play no more than 3 cards.
Which, that's your hand size as well.
Yes, it's 3. You can play one of those migration, war party, engagement cards, and if you have them, 2 event cards. But once you play them, they're gone from your hand. You don't...
Yeah, you never get them back.
You don't redo your deck because, once again, one of the conditions is, oh, my deck's gone, it's over, or the Transcontinental. So it becomes kind of an interesting cat and mouse game because those events are very powerful. They're very important. And if you don't get them at the right times, or if one player gets, I think, a lot at the beginning, they can really get out and kind of... You had like a wave of forces coming, and I remember thinking...
I had a very good opening hand with both of the cards, and so it's like, let's make a little bit of hay here.
Whereas I think Mike and I both, with our 5 events, I didn't draw most of my events till the last, which is fine. That's the way the game is. Yeah. It really, those events are just a minuscule part of it. But I like that element. I like that breakup, and I like the way that mechanic is, and the fact that you play your deck and it's over. That kind of puts a limit on it.
Yes,
60 to 90 minutes.
You're not getting the same events over and over again. It's like,
I'm getting hosed again by that event.
Yes,
I liked that.
And the other part of that is it adds this element to the game where you're trying to look for certain hand combinations, or you're like, it may be not the best use of this event, but I want to get through my cards because I'm in a winning position, so I'm trying to churn through my deck as quick as possible.
Yep.
And so you get into those little decision points from your hand management standpoint, and the tactical setup of where you're at, I think are very interesting.
Well, it's interesting because it puts another level of gaminess.
Yeah.
And what other game do we do that a lot in? Combat Commander.
Oh, yeah.
Combat Commander is at its heart, it's a deck game, right? You run through that deck, a turn's over. You have 3 turns, the game's over. And every time you take an attack, you play a card, you draw a card, and it's just the way that you're going to eat and mill through your deck. So a lot of times in Combat Commander, we'll be like, I'll take the shot because I'm winning and I want this to be over.
Yep.
oh, I have no shot of hitting you.
Yeah.
That's okay. I
Or,
just drew 3 cards.
I don't even care.
Yeah,
one
right.
way or the
I mean,
other. Just like, let's get these cards out of the way.
This one, it's not to that level, but it does include that, and I think it adds some gaminess.
But when you've got 15 cards, doing 1 or 2 cards, that's a huge percentage of your deck.
Yeah.
And it just adds that little extra element, which I really like in this game, and in the whole series of the other ones from different companies.
So with the cards, like I said, the 10 makeup of those movement cards, you're really only going to play 10 rounds. So I think you got to keep that in mind.
At most.
You got to keep that in mind. That's your goal, right? So as the Settlers US, you really want to build that rail line because that is worth 3 victory points to you. The other element is I want to control as many places as I can. And control is literally just having more cubes in an area. You can just have 1, right? So it's kind of funny. Some of these areas on the map, that's a space. You know,
there's tiny little sliver
it's a
at the
space,
top.
but it's nothing. So you know what? Just move a dude in there, and it's a little gamey as well, but it's part of what the game is. I think you got to keep sight of that.
Well, and that's I think different from a lot of dudes on a map games. A lot of dudes on a map games, you have your dudes out, and those help you to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
You control a bunch of these to give you control over a wider region, or those provide you some resources.
Or victory points
You
immediately.
don't get crap from these
No.
other than some end-game victory points.
Yep.
So you're spreading your guys out, and you're like, that hurts me tactically
Yep.
because I don't
So
have
it's
concentrated
about
forces.
it's about the lean. When do I actually do it?
Yeah.
Do I really try to make hay while the sun is shining? My first 5 or 6 cards. Once I get out to where I really want, then I'll spread out a little bit. And you're absolutely right.
And making that work well is very challenging at times.
Yeah.
But, it's such an interesting exercise because you're only incentivized to do that for those end-game victory points, which are extremely important. That's how you win the game. But, other games reward you for doing that. This one is like, no. Like, you have to make some very, very intense choices of, like, these guys aren't doing anything on the back of the map, but they're just holding a space.
Yeah.
Like,
one other thing I wanted to, and we need to talk about the dice because I think that's one of the better parts of the game, as well as the disc draw. But historically, this was a very difficult slog for the Plains Indians. They were never really truly going to come out victorious, right?
Yeah,
they were not going to stop the settlers. The settlers weren't going to be attacked so much that they decided, St. Louis is going to be the western edge of the United States of America. Manifest Destiny and California really forced everyone to think that way, and they were going to go there no matter what. So I think it's very cool that even though it's a very difficult thing, and frankly, the combat, which we'll talk about, the U.S. cavalry are superior in every way, shape, or form.
yeah.
Their dice are better. Their units, everybody's unit is the same. It still is one.
Yeah. One cube provides you 1 die.
But yeah, exactly. 2 or more cubes provide you no more than 2 dice,
Yes.
which I think is a very interesting thing because I also found myself deciding, do I really want to glom all these guys together, or do I want to spread them out a little bit just to make sure I have at least 2 dice?
Well, and
so that was an interesting choice.
Does it makes the concept of the retreats. When you roll those 2 blanks, you're like, I can't retreat my whole force, but I could retreat
1
some
unit.
of them.
Yep.
And then doing your fighting withdrawals as you get fewer and fewer units. It's very
There's a lot of
interesting.
cool. But back to my comment, really the Indians, the MPT and the SPT, they're trying to stop. Number 1 is trying to stop the railroad, I think. Number
there's
2,
points on the line there.
is pick off the white wagon train cubes, which is very challenging.
Yes.
It's not easy. You actually have to roll 2 hits in 1 combat to eliminate 1 wagon train. And you actually attack each wagon train cube alone, in and of itself.
And you have to have cleared off any defenders
Before.
prior to that as well.
So there's some interesting, unique. So that's another thing that the Native Americans, the Indians, are going for. The third and final thing is trying to control spaces, whether it's the purple spaces, which represent Canadian settlers, or the southern purple spaces, which are in essence Mexicans coming up from Mexico to settle those areas. So you got to remember where your victory points come from, and really there's a chance for the natives to win this game even though historically, I'm not sure it was. To me, it was pretty inevitable.
Yeah, I think the picture of them winning this game is that they don't get cleared off the board as badly as historically happened.
It doesn't mean they destroyed Custer and every single army every time. No, that's not going to happen. But that's also not victory. Victory is just having your tribe spread out and being able to exist and control your areas, and then
and
having
them was historically
having to have slowed that tide of those wagon trains. So I like that. I like that John, as the designer, decided that's the way he was going to tell the story, and not be it just a one-sided slaughter fest.
Yeah. Although what was very interesting is when we played, I felt like I absolutely crushed your guys' cubes off the board.
But it was because the victory conditions were...
But I didn't spread out enough at the end.
And Mike won.
And it was that was very interesting. And so I'm like, was that fun for you? Having gotten whomped for an hour and a half, and then
you heard me
having won?
You heard me complain a little bit. It wasn't necessarily as fun until I remembered, this is what the game was, because I would have played differently.
Yeah.
If you remember, because I'm always aggressive.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I'm playing. I was like running right up to St. Louis, and I was going to crush you right there. I kept losing dudes over and over again.
But if you can do it early and decisively, it helps. Huge boon.
But there's a huge cost if you don't.
And,
and I think the cost to me, ultimately, one time they didn't have any cubes on.
You didn't have any. I remember you had two.
Had 0, and then I got 2, and I was like, oh, this event card can only be played if you control 5 locations. So throw that one away, because I was never going to control. Ultimately, I think I controlled 4 spaces at the end of the game. But I like that concept, because a lot of these games, in fact, a lot of games, even East Front games that we play a lot, Soviets don't win necessarily because they destroyed all the advancing Germans.
And they never will.
No,
right?
Because historically that's not what it was. They win by protecting this city, and stopping the Germans from getting them.
By doing a slightly better retreat than was done.
And I'm okay with that, as long as you go into this game understanding that. I just think that's very important to understand for all players, particularly the NPT and STP players. You're also surrounded, right? The native tribes are surrounded to the north, the south, the east, and the west. It's all coming together at you. So you got to pick your battles. If you remember, Mike was really hot on defending the southern border. And I remember saying to him, Mike, we got to get these wagon trains, because I don't want him to finish the railroad. That's, to me, a little more important than that. But he won.
But there's points on the line for doing that if you can do it well and early, and you don't have to worry about it as much.
Because that was the irony. Like you said, I felt like you whomped us. You finished the rail line. You got 7 or 8
I won like every battle I partook in.
But ultimately, Mike beat you by 3 or 4 victory points because you didn't spread out. So keep that in mind. I actually really enjoyed that aspect of the game. That concept of what does victory look like for the natives, and is it possible for them to salvage some kind of victory from that? I thought it was well done. So let's talk about the combat. We kind of alluded to it. I love custom dice. I know you do.
Oh yeah,
as well.
Especially when they're nice.
Well, I love Ameritrash games that have really great custom dice, and these
are huge.
They're huge. They're chunky, and those are they're not embossed. They're printed on there.
But yeah, it's not like that little stickers on a wooden die that you get in some games.
And that's not going to come off.
Nope.
It's good and on there, and I just really like them. But there's a top predator, and it's the blue dice, right? Yes. The United States Cavalry. Historically, we think of the 7th Cav, but there were other units out there, and the 7th Cav is just the most famous because of their most famous defeat at Little Bighorn in Wyoming. So, but 4 out of the 6 sides it's 3 out of 6, I'm sorry, are hits for the cavalry. The settlers, it's only one. The other one is a treaty, and everybody has one treaty symbol, but that means the settlers aren't very good at attacking.
No, and all of the 3 different kind of Indian tribes have 2 hits and 1 treaty on them.
Which is much, much better than just the 1. It really seemed a lot,
but it's still
more,
not great.
It's not great. When you're rolling up against the cavalry, they're rolling 2 dice, and they're going to hit basically 50 to 60% of the time. And you just got to understand that. So you can't get in a direct battle every time. You got to be smart about it. You got to kind of do a little ambushes. And there's an ambush rule, right? When there's just a single, is it just a native cube? Or
Yes,
is
it has to be an Indian cube.
So not the purple.
No, these are Indians. These represent just conglomerations of northern Indian
Okay,
tribes.
I said the settlers from those countries, but so it's when there's one force there and they are attacked, they get to roll one die immediately.
Yeah, pre-combat, you roll a die.
If it's a hit, they lose a unit.
Then you conduct combat normally.
Yeah.
So it's just to stop you getting totally rolled.
Yeah. It's a cool concept. I don't know that I hit very often when I did my ambushes.
No, conversely, because the US Cav player controls the purple ones, I swear I hit every ambush that I launched with them.
Yeah.
When Mike just rolled in, I'm like,
sometimes it's going to happen.
Every time.
Yep, it's going to happen. But the treaty symbol is the treaty symbol and the blanks are probably one of the cooler parts of the dice. The treaty symbol, when both sides do there have to be no hits?
So no. So it has to be US faction and one of the Indian factions.
Yeah.
If they're in a combat and both sides roll at least one treaty symbol each, it doesn't, because it says all other hits for that round are ignored. And then you basically you have a little ceasefire.
Yeah. And the combat is over.
Yes.
And whoever has the most cubes in the area kind of pushes the other side to wherever they want adjacent.
And if it has to be an area they control if it can be.
There you go. Yes, there are some rules.
So you stop the fight and then you the person with the most cubes just says, "You go here."
Yeah.
And I feel like that didn't happen very often enough.
No, I think it only happened once, maybe twice. Which I thought was interesting.
Well, it was interesting because I think it happened that little because a lot of the events said ignore treaty symbols or treaties become hits.
I had a couple cards that were like that.
And we all, because you're like, sometimes they don't want to treat. They want to have a fight. And so that was also interesting, enhancing combats and things with those kinds of cards.
Yeah.
But the odd time that happens, because I also never went into a combat expecting it to happen. And so when it would always be like, oh.
Yeah.
I was hoping to wipe you off the board. Now I'm going to push you here.
Yeah.
And you already had 2 cubes there.
So
and now there's 8 guys in that X. I'm like, oh no. It's okay, but not great.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's like meaningless, but sometimes you're like, oh.
Well, there
really changes things.
Yeah, and there were times as the MPT player, I was like, please roll, trader, please, and it just very rarely happened. The other cool thing is the blank symbol is a unit retreat.
Yes.
So when you roll a unit retreat, even if you roll a hit on your other die, you can decide to move one unit to another area. And I think did it specify away from?
It just has to be an area that you control.
So it could be any direction, just an area.
Or an uncontrolled area if there's no other option.
Which actually could be beneficial. Oh, I didn't have any guys in there. Now I do. Oh, game's over. I got a point for controlling that. So I like that element because just like you said, a couple times I was like, I don't want to retreat. I'm just going to stay in the battle. Because if I leave that guy, I only have one guy, and I'm only going to roll one die.
Yeah.
With that second guy, I may still not hit, but at least I'm rolling 2 dice. So, very cool element. I think in the Birth of America series, that is not a choice. I think you have to retreat that number of guys. That to me is the only.
I feel like I remember that from 1812. Yeah.
The only major difference.
And do you roll more dice in that game?
I feel like you did. You aren't just limited to the 2.
I remember there were times where I was rolling the Tories, and it was just like you chuck 4 dice, and they were like, "Oh, they'd all go home."
Yeah. They were that panic symbol. And
there was less of that in this because you just roll a couple dice.
So it was optional retreats, and I think that's cool. I actually preferred the other way, where it wasn't a choice. But I saw the good of why it was included in the design here because it was interesting, especially with the way we were so disadvantaged against those cavalry.
The choice probably is a balance thing where you can choose to stick around if you want.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is you're going to roll 2 dice in that round of combat. You might have 6 guys. So do you retreat 2 of them now and hope for more retreats? And when do you start to bet on that? After you've lost 4 guys and you've only got 3 guys left?
Yeah.
you know, sometimes the choice is immediately apparent where you're like,
Yep.
I am about to die, I
Yep.
may as well save myself.
And I actually like that aspect of this game. I like that aspect of the other game because it was the same thing. If you had 3 British regulars and I had 2 Canadian, or I mean, Patriot militia, I'm like, okay, I want to get out of here.
see you.
You know. So, very cool combat system, very fun, nice to chuck the dice, and the big chunky dice I just really liked. And actually, each of the symbols is very different, which I also thought was
they're
very
unique for the different factions.
like here's the settlers have a crossed pistol, revolver, and a pickaxe, whereas the cavalry, it's crossed sabers. That's a knife, I guess.
Yeah, and then we have a tomahawk and a spear. I'm sure. I don't know if it was called a spear.
I think it is. I think it is. Yeah.
They might have
a lance. I think a lot of times it was called lances, particularly if they had like the southern tribes. I don't know.
So what I'll do is we've talked a lot. I'll show you how it works, and then we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So here's a look at the map. He says yes. Okay. This is kind of in the middle of a game. This is just kind of I just kind of set up. It doesn't have all the pieces. Normally it'd be a lot more in the ready boxes and stuff. But we played late last night, so I had to reset it up. So basically there's 4 kind of main factions, and those are represented by these decks of cards. So we've got the orange for the Southern Plains tribes. We've got the green for the Northern Plains tribes. And then we've got the brown, which are the settlers. And the settlers are these brown cubes. They also control these white ones, which are wagon trains that just kind of move autonomously from east to west. Then we have the blue, which is the U.S. cavalry. So these are obviously trained professional soldiers, often mounted, and those are these blue cubes. There's fewer of them in the game, but they roll much stronger dice. And then the U.S. cavalry player also controls these purple kind of not auxiliary, but they're kind of just a smaller enemy Indian force. What do they call them? Something? So it represents a bunch of different tribes up in Canada in the north, and then down in Mexico in the south. So the purple and the white cubes aren't represented by cards because those are kind of smaller pieces that they kind of move a little bit autonomously, but they are an adversary to the orange and purple. They're not an adversary to the settlers in the U.S. Cav. So there's kind of lots of different angles going on from this, but basically each of the colours has a disc in the draw bag, and you just draw a disc, and that's whose turn it is, and you execute their actions. So you pull one cube, and we have green. So the green represents these Northern Plains tribes, and basically what you're going to do is you have this deck of cards, and you will have a hand of 3 cards, and out of these cards you can play anywhere from 1 to 3 based on certain card allowances. So the green and orange tribe players, though, they have what's called war party cards, and war parties add cubes to the board, and you can do some big moves and bits and pieces with them. And then you also have event cards, so you can play 1 war party card, and if your hand has it, up to 2 events. You can play just a war party card if you were so inclined. You don't have to play any events. What you cannot do is you cannot play just a single event. If you have only events, you have to do that, and instead of you skip the event and you generically activate 2 groups to move 2 spaces each. And that's really how this game works. So the first thing that we do is we're going to play Rain in the Face. So this is the war party card we're going to play for this turn. And this, you just kind of follow the instruction. It says, add 3 cubes. So we've got 3 green cubes. They have to come from your ready box, little ready box here. And then we can put those onto the board. And so if you look here, it says green cubes. This is a movement chart. Green cubes may freely move and retreat into any northern plains or purple regions. Green cubes may move. Oh, that's movement. We don't care about movement. We just care about placement. So we're going to place those in areas where we have green cubes is what we're going to do. just so that we can bolster our forces, because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Or we could start, and it depends. If you're playing this 2-player, it's kind of, you control the green and the orange against the blue and the brown, basically. Or if you've got 4-player, you're split up. You're kind of allies, but you score individually, is how that's done. So let's put a bunch of guys into Black Hills. That's what we're going to do. We're going to put them all in that area. And there is a stacking limit of 8 friendly cubes in a space. So you do have to adhere to that after movement's completed. So then we can activate 3 groups, and this is a group, this is a group, this is a group. That's fairly intuitive. And then they can move up to 2 regions. So if I were to split these up, and this group went here and this group went here, that's 2 of my 3 groups. Or I could just move them all together. What we'll do is we'll move all of these over here. And then some of our other groups, let's move these guys. Well, I don't want to vacate everything. The map. Maybe that's all we're going to do. Maybe we'll reinforce here. We'll move these guys up here so that we're a little bit more protected when these guys come forward. So that was that card. We could look at our event and it says play before any war party card or the cavalry disc. Add 4 cubes to 1 northern region. Cavalry must be attacked this NPT turn. So maybe we should have done that. If we were to have done that before we played our war party, instead of placing 3 there, well, that's just it. I don't have enough to maximize that card. You can put 4 anywhere, so we put 4 there, and then the 3 from the card, well, we've only got 2, we would stick those on the board elsewhere. There you go. And then we'll charge all these guys over here and do this battle. Maybe we'll do it that way. So that's how you can play 2 cards. And if you had another event that was eligible to be played, you could do that too. You're going to go through your deck much quicker, because your deck is only that's a very small number of cards, respectively. But if you're trying to shorten the game, you're trying to play as many cards in a hand as possible, and you would want to shorten the game if you're kind of in a winning position, because the first person to completely have used up their deck, that is an endgame trigger. The other endgame trigger is if the 2 parts of the Transcontinental Railroad ever meet up, that triggers the end of the game as well. But yeah, you can play it so that you kind of churn through your cards, or you can be a bit more conservative depending on what you've got. So, you've done all your moves. Once we've done all that that's on the cards, we then resolve engagements. So the only one that we've got here is this one. And so we've got 6 green cubes going against 2 brown and 2 blue. And in this game, you roll, if you have 1 cube, you roll 1 of the respective color die. If you have more than 1, you roll 2. You don't roll 1 per cube. And that's important because you're going to roll multiple rounds of combat, and this just forces you into some choices and for some things to happen. So here we have 2 brown, so the US player is going to roll 2 brown, 2 blue, they're going to roll 2 blue, and then we've got only green, so we're going to roll 2 green. So this, looking at this isn't great. They don't have as many numbers, so they can't sustain the losses as much, but rolling lots and lots of dice is very good. And what we'll do is we'll take a quick look at the dice. So the green dice has a hit symbol on it, it has a hit symbol on it, and it has a treaty symbol on it, which is this broken arrow, and then it has 3 blanks. The settler dice, the brown one, has 1 hit symbol and 1 treaty symbol and 4 blanks, and the US cavalry has 1, 2, 3 hits, 1 treaty, and 2 blanks. So they're significantly better and they scale. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll all of these together. And that's funny. So we've got 3 blanks, 2 brown and a blue. We've got a blue hit, and we rolled 2 treaty symbols. Treaty symbols in this instance don't do anything. We'll explain where they do here in a second. The blue scores a hit, so we have to take a hit. And this goes to our casualties box. And then the blanks aren't just misses. A blank affords you the opportunity to retreat. So what we could do is we could retreat 2 brown. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We could retreat all of these guys. And we're kind of saving ourselves from getting wiped out. you can only retreat the amount that you have retreat dice. So we do have to fight another round of combat, and we're only going to fight that next round of combat with 1 blue die and then 2 green ones. So we'll roll it, and we rolled a hit and a hit either side, and so we lose 1 apiece to their boxes, and the treaty symbol doesn't do anything in that instance. So we lost the territory, but we only lost one of those 4 units. So, you know, expeditious retreats, if you roll those, all those misses aren't necessarily bad. So you can get away with some interesting maneuvers and things like that of getting out of dodge. So that's kind of how a standard combat works. What we will do, though, is... what's a good way to show this? That's not great. For example, if we had gone in here and attacked this group with these guys, and the dice roll had come up where we had both rolled a treaty symbol, these only trigger when both sides roll it, and when at least one of the sides is US and one of the sides is one of the Indian tribes. And so you literally form a treaty, you do a ceasefire. If there are any other hits on the dice that are rolled, those are ignored. And what happens here is you sit down, you agree to cease hostilities, and kind of reposition. And what happens in this instance is the player with the larger force retreats the player with the smaller force. So this can be extremely devastating if you needed a coup de grace, but you end up signing a treaty and have to kind of go home. But then it also doesn't eliminate, and you can in some situations end up consolidating forces. So in this instance, the US player has to move the green player, the Northern Plains tribes, to kind of an adjacent space that they control if possible. So they're going to move them all back here. So that's what a treaty does. It's interesting. I felt like it didn't come up that often where it was important, because there's also a lot of event cards that say treaties are considered hits for this combat, or you ignore treaties because you don't want to treat and you just want to kill. So I felt like we didn't have a lot of those. We had maybe 2 or 3 in the game. And considering how many combats you do, that was kind of a surprise. And there's only 1 on each die, so for them both to have rolled on either side, it's not the most likely thing in the world. But it's an interesting when it does happen, and I never played expecting a treaty roll to come up, and so when it did, it really changed kind of a little tactical situation of what was going on. It's a very interesting part of the dice. But that's roll, add your cubes, do your moves, resolve your engagements, done. And then you just move on to the next player. And so you draw the next chit. And this one is black. And black is one of these interesting, unique ones. And what happens when we black, we build the Transcontinental Railroad. And what we do with that is, you look at the railhead, which is the most recent black cube on the railroad track. We're going to do both. So in this one, you look at how many brown cubes are in areas adjacent to the railhead. So it's right here. So we look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you add that many cubes to the railroad up to a maximum of 3. So it's very imperative, very important for the settler, the brown player, to always have settlers working on this part of the railroad, because that's going to make it as quick as possible. And the Plains tribes players are going to be trying to kill these settlers, because then they can't build the railroad, and they score points if they can prevent the railroad being completed by the end of the game. So that's something they're constantly trying to do. It's this aim and an objective in the game. Well, we add 3 there. Then we go over to this side. And this side functions slightly differently towards the beginning of the game, because the railroad has to be blasted through the Rocky Mountains. So until we get out of these little M spaces, which are the Rocky Mountains, after we get out of that, the same rules apply. Everyone runs out of Sacramento, and we can build, if we've got all the guys, 3 aside from each side. But to get through the mountains, you have to roll dice. So you roll 2 dice, and if you roll a hit symbol, which again is 1 and 6 on these brown dice, you get to put a cube out. So you roll 2, we rolled nothing. That was a treaty, not a hit. If you roll 2 treaties, you get really lucky, you can put 2 cubes out. If you roll nothing like we did, nothing useful anyway, you just don't put any out over here. So So this is very slow, but once it's done, you kind of race to get it finished. So that's all that happens with the black cube. Then we just reach in and we go again. And we got the orange one. And so very similarly, the orange player's got 3 cards. They're going to choose to play one of their cards. They're going to play a war party. They're going to play an event. Add up to 2 SPT cubes to 1 STP region. The attacker's treaty symbols cause hits in 1 battle. So this is what I talked about with you don't get that many treaties, because often when you're doing battles, you add a bunch of guys, you perform a battle, they're not interested in doing a treaty. Instead, the treaty's hits instead in one of the battles that may occur. So you're gonna play a card. We're gonna add 4 guys to the board. Oops! Before we knock them all over. 2, 4, 6, 8. We're maxed out. So then we're gonna kind of charge over here to Dodge City, and we're gonna perform a big combat. But that combat, when we roll the treaty symbols, we're going to get a big bonus, because those are going to be hits for us. And we chuckle the dice, and I've got 1 hit because it's a treaty. They do 1 hit, and they've got a retreat each. So I scored 2 hits, and when you score hits, something we haven't talked about yet, is hits have to come from the larger of the 2 factions that are there. So our 2 hits both go on the cavalry. That's very bad, because that's worth some victory points. So that was our 2 hits. They score a hit to us. And then we've got 2 blanks, a brown and a blue. At this point, we're going to take those and we're going to retreat. So why this is important is because for every 2 blue cav that are killed in combat is 1 victory point. So one of these goes to casualties, and the other one goes onto our victory point track. And so the blue already doesn't have as many cubes as some of the other players. They're very strong, but don't have as many. That can be very punishing, very painful to lose those. You give up victory points, and it permanently reduces the size of your army. And then we just, any other moves that you might do, you might come and do this. This is important because you can ambush. So let's say these 2 move in here. If you ever attack a single Indian cube, regardless of color, they get to do an ambush, and that is an unopposed single die roll, which is a nothing. And then you resolve combat normally. So we would just roll these. Great, we scored a hit, did it. Problem solved. But this ambush means that you can't just roll single cubes. There's always a chance they might kind of do some attrition to you. And then, let's see. The other ones that let's pull. It's a bit white. White's a very interesting one, because white is also kind of an autonomous one. When you pull the white, what you do is you take 2 white wagon trains from the ready box, you put them in St. Louis, and then every single white cube must move. And you don't have a choice about that. They will move. So what's going to happen is that there's these 2 white wagon trails, one down here and one over here, that splits off. Those are the trails that you have to follow along. This choice is made once they make St. Louis. As soon as they're in Kansas City and they're on this track, they have to go this way. As soon as they're here in Mississippi, or up, whatever they choose to go into this one, they have to go this way. You can't ever kind of divert them. So what happens is everyone moves a space forward on the trail. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we can choose to either set them this way, where there's a whole bunch of Indians here, or this way, where we've got a little bit more protection on the route so far. And that's important because you don't have control over that. And that's also important because if they attack and kill these white wagon trains, those are victory points. You have to go and protect those. If the wagon trains ever make it off the map into the Rockies, they're victory points for the US player. So they're a really important part to try to protect or to attack, depending on which side you're playing. But they also they will move. You have to keep up with them. So now the pressure's on to move these guys kind of all forward, try and drive these out to protect these. Same thing here as well. Because you don't want to just cede those victory points, because they're worth quite a lot. And then that's the white disc. Then you move on to the next disc, And you basically keep going like that with... so we've got the blue disc. Again, blue player is going to play one of their 3 cards. They're going to add cubes. They always get added to either St. Louis or Sacramento. A lot of the time it's going to be St. Louis early game. And then you're going to activate groups. You're going to have different events that you can use to help you attack other players. Brown is very much the same type of thing. Those ones add a lot of cubes, there's a lot of them, but they're very weak and they're not good in combat. You're generally trying to keep them close to the railroad so they can keep building it. And the timing of when the brown and the black cubes come out of when you build in things is very interesting. You know, the Indians are trying to kill the brown cubes before they can build the black ones, but sometimes you get a lucky draw and they can build it before you can wipe them out, but then that sets them back for the next round. And then the last one is a purple disc. The purple disc controls these little... They're kind of NPC units. You get to add a single cube to either one of the spaces they control or Canada or Mexico, and then they can move one group 2 spaces. So they're just a thorn in the sides of the North and the South Plains tribes. And then... there's victory points to be had by taking 3 of the 5 of these. If they don't do that, they're going to lose victory points for having not done that. And so we've got these, so they're going to come down and just occupy these areas just to be some stubborn resistance. They don't do a lot, but it's just, you can be opportune. You know, they can start moving down here and really kind of screwing over some of the other players and things like that. So, but that's how this game works. The flow of it is not complicated. All the movement rules and bits and pieces are all on here. Sequence of play, and then has all the dice faces, but you learn those extremely quickly. But that's how the game functions. Very similar to a lot of those Birth of America series, but this one has this really great focus and narrative in it as well. So that's a look at the board and kind of how it works. And what we'll do is we'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the board and how the game plays.
Beautiful presentation.
Oh yeah, it's turned out great.
There's no doubt this is one of the most pretty Euro, Waro type games that we played over the past couple of years.
The one, and also, as a note of that, the cards are huge tarot-sized cards, and they also have really good artwork on them. I really enjoyed playing with them.
Yeah.
I remember the little small ones from the other series.
Yes.
This is nice. It's very extra, but it's great.
Yeah.
The one thing that we hadn't really talked about was the building of the Transcontinental Railroad.
Yep.
Which I really, really like in this.
Oh, it's fantastic.
That to me is one of the elements that actually probably elevates this above some of the other games that use this system, because I felt like there was this really great focus and a great narrative built into the game.
Yep.
So, I don't know. We've played 1812, and I think we played 1754.
And I've actually played 1775. I played it with my brother.
And those ones, it's like, here's this huge map with a bunch of areas, and you've got a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, I felt like at times I was just like aimlessly skirmishing and just trying to like take areas, which is the point of the game. But it was really interesting having this great focus in it of like, okay, my wagon trains have to go on these wagon rails, so I need to protect those.
Yep, because they build the rail lines.
And the wagon trains are autonomous. Those guys are going out west.
Yeah.
And then the settlers, you have to bring along to the railheads, because they're going to build these... They're going to construct the rail line.
That's what I meant. I thought you said settlers. So it's the settlers, the brown cubes, that build the rail.
Yes.
The white cubes are just trying to get across the board and get off the map.
But if you don't protect them, they're going to be killed and you're going to lose victory points.
Although, they're very hard to kill.
Yes, but...
You attack each one of them, but you got to have 2 hits. Now, sorry, I interrupted you. I reread the rules and I was looking at it and I'm like, it advises that the Indian tribes team up.
Yes.
So it advises that...
Because then you can have 16 guys in a space.
Yep. Well, you can still... Yeah, you can... Yeah, you're right.
I think you can, anyway.
But, something like this, 6 Northern Plains and 4 Southern, they're each going to roll 2 dice, and those hits combine.
Yes.
So if I roll 1 hit on an orange die and 1 hit on a green, that's a hit, and guess what? That wagon train is removed. Now, I didn't do the research and see who got the victory point. Maybe it's the person that has the most cubes. That was it, right? The person that had the most cubes? Or was that unclear?
I'm almost 100% positive that I read the rules. It says you flip a coin to see who gets it. I'll have to check that.
I don't like that.
Because I read that earlier.
I don't remember that because we never really did that.
It was
interesting.
Yeah. I'll try and find that because it was hilarious.
Well, did they include a coin in the game?
No, it's not.
That would have been cool.
But the your settlers, you're trying to spread them out for some dudes on the map kind of a game, but you need to have at least 3 at the railhead when that black disc is drawn to put out the max number of cubes. Because
if you only have 1,
if you can
put out 1.
If you can max out building,
there are 27 rail line spaces.
I think you can do it reasonably in 7 turns, and it will take you at least 10 to get through a deck.
Yes.
So if you're trying to race to the end, the kind of the US settler player has a lot of control over that.
Yeah. Well, and it's a little different out west, right? The Rockies are harder.
Yes.
So out west, it's not about the settlers until they get through the Rocky Mountains. The space is marked M.
Yeah, so when it's kind of out on the plains, if you've got 3 dudes at a railhead, you can put out 3 cubes.
Yeah.
If you've got 4, you still only put out 3. Caps out at 3. If you've only got 1, you only put out 1. But the Rockies, there's 5 spaces. You roll 2 of these brown settler die, which we remember only have 1 hit on them.
They're bad die.
And for every hit you roll, you put a cube in one of these 5 Rocky Mountain spaces. And so, if you're extremely lucky and you start getting a couple here and there, you could get lucky and get that quickly, but a lot of the times you're going to have placed that 5th one, and you're going to be past Salt Lake City, building it the other way, and they're going to meet just after the Rockies.
Yeah.
But
and I think historically they met in western Utah, kind of northwestern Utah.
Yeah.
So they did. They met just before the Rockies, but you're right. If this goes well and that doesn't go well, they will meet in the Rockies, and it won't. But I think you're exactly right. That addition of the rail line, it's a sideshow, but it's a cool sideshow. Very historically. Are you looking for the flip?
I am. I'm listening.
So it's a historical sideshow, but it is a little bit of an interesting exercise and something you got to manage. You got to manage those settler cubes. So it was funny. Mike and we talked a little bit about strategy beforehand. And I told him, really, the important thing is to stop the railroad and then control areas. I said, white cubes, I thought were just icing on the cake, right?
Yeah.
But I'm really trying to kill 2 or 3 of your settlers, so you're only building 1 spur of the rail. That's really, because you get 3 victory points as the Indians if you stop that. So that's the part, you got to manage those cubes. Like you said, you got to move them out, you got to keep them up and kind of protect them with the cavalry.
Yeah, because like you said, you want combined arms. You want 2 cav and you want 2 brown dice, because when you roll that in combat,
you're going to hit more than you're
doing really well.
So yeah, that's a really good aspect of this game. And frankly, the Transcontinental Railroad wasn't really a passenger train until it was, it was more, they were trying to get out west to build it, and then people could start, rather than going on the wagon trains, they could then go across and be passenger trains. So it really improved the colonization of the West and really sealed the fate, I think, of the West and the native peoples, the Plains Indians.
I can't speak to how much I enjoy that part of this game.
It's very cool.
It just adds such a really great focus to the way you're pushing your cubes around, which again sometimes can feel a little aimless, or you just get bogged down in a siege of, Louisburg, and you're like, okay, great, and some of the other ones. But this one, I'm like, yes, I've got to move these guys here, and I want to have these guys to protect them, because, the Transcontinental Railroad also coincides with this northern wagon trail that the wagon trains have to go along for half the map.
Yeah, so, then it diverges.
So you're encouraged to kind of do that. And then you got to send off some cavalry sorties to go and protect them as they go through the last Rockies and stuff.
The cool thing about the wagon trains is those trails. There's 2 trails, so you can kind of choose.
Yeah,
I'm going to send 2 or 3 guys down here, and I'm going to send 2 or 3 up here, and then, or you can just send them all north and protect them the whole way. There was no requirement for you to put stuff on the southern.
It's that's the only point of choice that you have is which way do you send them.
And it's the same amount of territory, so it's not like one is longer than the other. But I did like this one. I think if I was playing the it's like, because you have two choices at the end. If there's a bunch of natives here, I'm
Yeah.
going to go north. So that was kind of cool.
The other part of that is early on, you want to send some one way and some the other. And then it's kind of like, how far can you get? And one of those will probably become more lucrative or easier to pass through. So I basically abandoned the southern trail.
Well, because I had no cubes up here, basically, which was fine.
And Mike had done a couple stout defenses. Those broke down eventually, and I got a couple off the southern trail, but it was like, it's not worth the hassle. Because I can commit more to the north, and so they were a little bit more protected. But it's a really interesting part of the game, because you only have control over that first point of which way do they go, and after that they just plod along on their own, and you're like, oh, please don't run away too fast. And you pull the white disc first, and then they bugger off, and then you got no protection. You're like, oh no, where's my cav disc, please?
I think that's the very cool. We love chit pull games. You know, war games that have chit pull, because you cannot tell who's going to go. It creates that confusion, and really, I think mimics command and control very well. This has that in a war game, but a different style of war game, because it's very conceivable that as the U.S. player, you can end one turn with white cubes and move along, right? Then you put all those back in the bag and you shake them up, and it's very possible that you can then draw that immediately again, and it's like, oh, I just got these guys off the board because you were right there. And there's some real coolness about that tension and angst. It's also, there were a couple times we were like, please don't pull the black cube, because we had killed the settlers that were there.
Yeah, because if that pulls and there's no settlers,
then they don't build. So I was like, please pull the black cube.
And I'm like, get the brown one so I can push the brown guys up.
So that is a very cool, I like the chit pull, the disc draw. I think it's very interesting and keeps it light and fun along with the dice.
Yes.
This game is a light war game.
Oh, yeah.
With some cool historical theme, cool historical cards. I'm not sure it's going to be for everybody, because not everybody wants to play this conflict. Sure. But I think this is an extremely good introductory war game that's unique, interesting, because of the things like the rail line. And it's just, I had a good time with it. Well, I enjoyed this game.
And it can play 4 players.
Yeah.
There is a full solo module.
Yeah, and I'd like to try it. I need to get around to it.
It's like a whole solo book with a bunch of different scenarios in it. It's only like 3 or 4 pages of rules. Yeah. It's like 10 pages of scenarios that you can do.
Sorry, we have a buffalo herd going over the house right now, so we apologize.
And there's a little, the whole separate thing that you can do. And I think that might be interesting to see.
I'd like to try it just so I can see it.
Is it something?
Yeah, but I don't know. For even a 2-player game, very cool. I liked this a lot when we played it 4 years ago. I liked it a lot when we played it just a couple of days ago with Mike here. And I'd love to break this out with even my children. I think could pick this up and enjoy it. It's a cool strategy game.
And they probably could, because most of the cards, it's like 4 cubes, 3 groups, 2 spaces. Yeah. Real simple. There's flavor text and little factoids on them, but only the event texts have stuff on them. Yeah. It's like, I gotta read something.
And those are, sometimes they're challenging, because it's like an if-then, if you control these many spaces, you can place these out. If not, the event just, you can't play it.
Or it's like, hey, you can do this thing, and it's like understanding when that's opportune or not. So you kind of, do I hang on to it, or do I just try to burn it? But yeah.
Anyway, I can't remember which card that was, but
I don't know. Maybe because we'd already played this. So I've heard a lot of people complain about the rulebook, and like, oh, it's quite vague, or they had a lot of questions about things. And again, maybe it's because we played a prototype of this a long time ago. I don't know if I had hardly any questions.
I think the only thing that we missed was that. What was the one thing we missed? Was it the 2 hits for the settler while we played?
For the wagons instead of the 1.
Frankly, the rules aren't that complex. That was the only thing we missed. I think everything else we did extremely correctly. And that has been I'm going to be honest, and I love John. I love his games and his designs. That has been the complaint that I've heard from more people. That sometimes the rule book isn't as good as it needs to be.
And what I'm saying is in this game, in other games, that is not unfounded. In this one, I think it might be.
Yeah, it might. Maybe it's just
maybe that's a me
holdover.
thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I thought this was very approachable, and I understood everything. There was never a time I was like, oh,
what does this mean?
Let me look this up on BGG
pretty
that I've got to
clear.
do in a lot of other games. Did not have those questions.
I will say there was language on one card that I think we kind of had some banter back and forth, but that's typical with a lot of games. It's because I always want to adjudicate things in my favor. So I'm like,
we all want to do that.
That word doesn't matter. Get rid of that and, but I like this game. Beautiful, great production, fun to play, enjoyable, cool history. I enjoy it. Plains Indian Wars is a good game.
This is something that you could whip out in a classroom, right?
Yes.
In an educational setting as well, because it can sit 4 people, and you can do it and talk about it afterwards. There's a lot to like in this game as well.
Yeah.
Easy to learn and quick to play. Plays an hour and a half.
So GMT produced this game, obviously, and published it. And I'm not sure they've done a ton of games like this, right? This Euro style. I mean, obviously, Coin has some Euro style.
That's more hardcore, though.
Right, but I like that they now have a really more introductory Waro. Right?
Yeah. This has probably got a wider appeal mechanically speaking.
Yeah. Now, some of their other games, they use counters, but they do have some of the Euro. Time of Crisis is one that I can think of. Conquest of
Paradise?
Yes. That's kind of that even has cubes, if I remember. I love that game. We need to play that
That's like
game.
a 4X style game.
Yeah, we need to play that again. But I'm really glad they have something like this in their catalog, because I think it's cool and interesting. Now, they have a couple of other games kind of like this. Not completely like this, but that Border Ravers. I mean, it has little meeple sheep and
I'm very
meeple
interested
cattle.
to see what that turns out to be like.
Well, I'm trying to do an interview with the designer. Why am I drawing a blank? Ed Beach. And he's just not, he's working on it. He's busy, right? No, I'm not. No, don't. He can get it to me when he gets it to me. But I'm interested in that game because, once again, that's a crossover. Got a lot of war game in it, but it's got some Euro stuff. And I just think it's fun.
Yeah.
It's something you're not going to crack your skull trying to understand and play.
Not every game has to be.
No. Interesting.
Yes. So, Plains Indian Wars from GMT. Check this out if there's something you're interested in. Appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander for theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.